Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take, well, a whole stack of really interesting sources, interviews, company insights, you name it, and boil them down into what you really need to know. Today, we're plunging into something pretty critical. It's right at that intersection of global challenges and some really groundbreaking innovation. We're talking about the future of European agriculture.
Right. And specifically, how one entrepreneur is trying to connect climate change, this huge issue, with a mission to change farming through, well, genuinely innovative finance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about Laimonas. He's a serial fintech entrepreneur, now the CEO of InSoil. You might have known them as Heavy Finance before.
That's right.
And our mission here really is to unpack his journey. It's quite unique. And explore how his passion, and it's a deep passion for climate, the environment, sustainability, how that's not just, a nice add-on, but it's actively shaping the future of farming across Europe.
Yeah, it's more than just a business story, isn't it? It's about purpose, about impact. Totally. And just so you know where we're getting this from, it's all based on exclusive interviews with Laimonas himself, plus lots of detailed company materials from InSoil, and also biomakers who are doing some amazing work we'll get into.
Okay, let's dive in then. What's really compelling, I think, is how Laimonas' own story kind of reflects this broader trend we're seeing. Founders, established professionals, pivoting their skills towards climate solutions.
Driven by more than just market opportunity.
Exactly. Often it's this deep personal sense of urgency, like, I need to do something.
So let's talk about that background. Laimonas came from fintech, right? A long, successful career payments, marketplace lending. He even founded Finbi.
Yeah, Finbi, a successful peer-to-peer lending platform, so he knew finance inside out. But then something changed. His focus shifted quite dramatically, actually.
So what was it? What was that trigger moment that pushed him towards, of all things, agricultural finance?
He calls it an aha moment.
Yeah.
Just this sudden, profound realization that he, personally, could actually make a significant dent in global warming.
Yeah. It wasn't just, oh, here's a new market. It was like a fundamental shift in his purpose. It really lit a fire under him, this personal passion to tackle the climate crisis directly.
So the motivation wasn't purely profit.
It seems not solely profit-driven, no. He talks about wanting to prove that success can be achieved ethically, with a smile, challenging that old-school, mean suit-and-tie finance image.
Interesting. Is that just a personality thing, or is there a strategy there?
I think it's deeper. It's this understanding that trust, collaboration, doing things ethically, these are actually competitive advantages, especially in a sector like agriculture, which is so relationship-driven and, let's face it, unpredictable.
Farmers need to trust you, right?
Absolutely. They're wary of institutions that don't get their cycles. Laimonas' whole approach seems rooted in this people-first idea. He talks a lot about delegating, surrounding himself with smarter people. He genuinely seems to believe a business is just the energy of its people.
And that extends to his vision for farming itself.
Definitely. He has this bold ambition, for instance, to make the plow disappear.
Make the plow disappear.
Yeah, it's a powerful symbol, isn't it? Shifting away from disruptive practices towards more sustainable, soil-friendly methods.
Okay, so he has this intense personal drive, this vision. He turns to agriculture. And you mentioned earlier, small and medium farms in Europe, say 50 to 150 hectares, they're struggling to get finance. That seems odd.
It does seem counterintuitive, yeah. But it raises a crucial question. Why aren't the traditional banks lending to this sector? It's absolutely vital.
Do we know the scale of the problem?
We do. The sources point to a pretty striking number. Roughly $16 billion in working capital loans is missing every year for European farmers.
$16 billion, wow. Why? Why are banks holding back?
Well, for most banks, loans under, say, $50,000 often just aren't profitable. Their structures are rigid, admin costs are high, regulations are tight. It just doesn't fit their model easily.
And farming has its own rhythm, doesn't it? Payments might not be like clockwork.
Exactly. Farmers depend on nature's cycles. Payments might be late, sometimes up to 90 days. But, and this is Laimonas' point, they do ultimately pay back. He actually argues agriculture is less risky over the long term than, say, real estate or transport.
Because people always need to eat.
Fundamentally, yes. It's an essential service. Food production is foundational.
And isn't this sector heavily supported by the EU anyway?
And massively. Get this. 38% of the entire EU budget goes to agriculture.
38%.
Yeah. It just underlines how strategically important it is. It's prime infrastructure for Europe. Vital for food security, stability.
So you've got this huge strategic importance, massive EU funding, yet the banks are still hesitant.
It's a paradox, isn't it? And it really highlights why InSoil's model is potentially so significant. They're stepping into that gap, that void left by traditional finance.
Providing capital, but with an understanding of farming.
Precisely. They seem to get the unique rhythms and challenges.
Okay, so this massive gap exists. How does InSoil actually bridge it? What do they do?
So their core business facilitates debt instruments. Basically, investors lend directly to farmers.
Right. Peer-to-peer almost.
Sort of, yeah. And often, heavy machinery is used as collateral. Think tractors, combines.
Okay, what are the typical loan sizes?
The average is around $60,000, maybe for about 33 months, give or take. But that's just the traditional lending part. Where it gets really innovative is their focus on regenerative farming.
Regenerative farming. Tell me more about that.
This is where the concept of carbon farming comes in. InSoil actively supports farmers who adopt practices like no-till farming.
No-till, so planting without digging up the soil.
Exactly. It keeps carbon locked in the ground, prevents its release, and healthy soil can actually draw more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It basically transforms farmers from, well, perceived polluters into carbon sequesters.
And does that make a big difference?
It can make a huge difference. 1 hectare of land farmed this way can remove roughly 2.5 tons of CO2 each year. And compare that to conventional plowing. The difference can be up to 5 tons of CO2 per hectare. Because plowing releases about 3 tons, whereas no-till removes 2. That's a massive swing.
Okay, that's significant. So how does InSoil encourage this shift?
Through their green loans model, and this sounds incredibly farmer-friendly. They offer 0% interest loans specifically for farmers willing to make that transition to regenerative practices.
0% interest. What's the catch? What's in it for InSoil?
It really seems like a genuine win-win, going back to that people-first idea. In return for the free capital, which is obviously huge for the farmer, InSoil receives a fixed share of the carbon credits generated by that improved land.
Ah, okay. So the farmer gets the capital they desperately need. They adopt sustainable methods, improve their soil, maybe even diversify income.
Exactly. And meanwhile, corporations looking to offset their own emissions can buy these high-integrity carbon credits from InSoil.
High integrity being the key phrase there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially for tackling those tricky Scope 3 emissions, the indirect ones in the value chain, like supply chains or product use. Those are often the hardest to deal with. InSoil basically acts as the trusted broker verifying the impact.
Right. And for this whole system to work, that verification, proving the carbon removal, must be absolutely rock solid. How do they actually do that?
Yeah, you can't just take someone's word for it. Their measurement, reporting, and verification framework, the MRV, sounds incredibly robust.
How so?
They use a combination of things. Lab-grade soil sampling, advanced remote sensing like satellite imagery, expert agronomists on the ground, and sophisticated data analysis.
Data analysis using what?
This is where it gets really interesting. They draw on a proprietary database, apparently over 10 million microbial references. They work with partners like biomakers for this. It lets them dive deep into the soil's biology, its microbial life.
So understanding the tiny living things in the soil.
Precisely. That gives them an unprecedented understanding of soil health and its actual potential to sequester carbon. It's the scientific backbone that makes the whole thing credible.
Okay, so it's a win for farmers, a win for the environment.
Yeah.
What about the carbon market itself? And the investors funding these green loans? Carbon credit prices seem to be moving around a bit.
They are definitely on the rise. We've seen jumps from around $20 to nearly $60 per ton recently. It's volatile, but the trend is upwards.
And for the investors in the green loans?
Well, InSoil suggests that even at a fairly conservative price, say 35 euros per ton for the credits, investors could potentially see an internal rate of return, an IRR of around 20%.
20%. That's pretty compelling financially, not just ethically.
Exactly. It shows it's not just philanthropy. It's designed as a sound investment. And this all kind of culminates in a huge piece of news recently. InSoil announced a $100 million partnership with Key Carbon just this June 2025.
$100 million?
Yeah. The aim is to scale up their efforts dramatically, get to 1 million hectares under regenerative practices.
And the goal for carbon sequestration?
The goal is sequestering over 35 million tons of atmospheric CO2. It really shows the scale of ambition here, linking finance and environmental goals.
That $100 million partnership is really something. It suggests massive confidence in their verification, doesn't it? So let's dig a bit deeper into that science. How are they measuring this? What's the tech? And how has soil testing evolved to even make this possible?
It's fascinating, actually. Soil testing isn't new, of course. People started measuring basic nutrients way back in the mid-19th century, then maybe organic matter content in the 1970s.
Pretty basic stuff.
Right. But today, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
We've got advanced DNA sequencing, eco-computing techniques like the bee crop test from biomakers.
DNA sequencing of soil.
Exactly. It allows for this really comprehensive understanding of the soil biology. We're moving way beyond just the chemical makeup to understand the actual living ecosystem in the soil, the microbes that drive its health.
Okay, that sounds incredibly advanced. What are the practical benefits for, say, carbon farming using these modern tests?
Well, they give incredibly detailed info. You can identify hidden nutrient deficiencies the old tests would miss, even spot potential disease-causing pathogens.
So farmers can be much more targeted.
Precisely. Tailor interventions, improve soil health more effectively, potentially get better yields with fewer inputs like fertilizers or pesticides. It can be really cost-effective in the long run, even if there's an initial cost or complexity.
Makes sense.
And Laimonas has this key insight he talks about. The darker the soil, the more it can absorb organic carbon.
Right, that rich, dark earth.
Yeah. And that's why InSoil is strategically focusing on regions with historically rich soils, places like Eastern Europe, the Baltics. These soils might have been damaged by intensive farming over the years.
But the potential is still there.
Exactly. Huge recovery potential for locking away carbon. The science really backs up the potential for significant climate impact in these areas.
So connecting this back to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
It feels like InSoil isn't just building a finance company. They seem to be banking on a fundamental shift in how business itself is measured.
I think that's right. Laimonas predicts this transformative shift, maybe by 2027, 2030, where CO2 avoided or removed becomes a primary measure of business success, not just profit, but environmental impact too.
Forcing companies to take it seriously.
In a very real, financially accountable way. And this fits perfectly with wider EU goals, doesn't it? Like the InSoil project aiming to cut fossil-based plastic production by 20%, microplastic releases by 30% by 2030.
How does that connect?
They're developing bio-based plastics and agrochemicals that actually biodegrade in the soil. Imagine the savings for farmers, potentially $17.4 million by 2035. They estimate, while also cutting CO2 emissions significantly. It's all part of this bigger push.
It really is a comprehensive vision.
Agriculture is right at the heart of it.
What an incredible story we've unpacked today. Really, from Laimonas Noreka's personal aha moment, his whole people-first approach, all the way to this massive, your $100 million deal aiming to lock away millions of tons of carbon. His journey just perfectly shows that intersection of finance, tech, and real environmental passion, doesn't it? And it's sparking this quiet revolution in farming across Europe.
What really strikes me is how it demonstrates that sustainable farming isn't just, the right thing to do ecologically.
It's also economically viable. Powerfully so, potentially.
Yeah.
And I think this whole deep dive really underscores the power of smart investment, of collective action when we apply it to these huge global challenges.
Yeah.
It's a reminder, isn't it, that problems like climate change aren't necessarily insurmountable.
We have tools, we have innovators.
We do. So as you think about everything we've discussed today, Laimonas, InSoil, the science, the finance, maybe the question to ponder is, what role can each of us play in helping shift traditional industries towards futures that are both more sustainable and profitable? Knowing that, well, the problem is solvable, but action really is needed now, not just someday down the line.